HP10b11. So the first thing is, most of you, your calculator is relatively new. And if you noticed, if your calculator is new, then you didn't manage to get any answer correct. And that probably frustrated the hell out of you. So the first thing we're going to do is, by default, your calculator is set to a compounding frequency of months. So by default, your calculator says that you have 12 payments of interest per year, which is what we want, which is not what we want. We want an annual compounding period. So the first thing we're going to do is change that. So unfortunately, the yellow buttons are not, yellow writing is not quite in focus. So if you have a look at the bottom part of the payment function, okay, your payment button up top, it says PYR. That is your periods per year. So that's what we want to change. So we want to press 1, okay? Anytime we want to use any of our orange keys, we need to press the orange button. And this is called the shift button. So we press 1, shift, and you can see that in the corner of my screen, the word shift appeared, hence it's called the shift button. And we press PYR. And then with this particular calculator, you know that you've inputted the variable, the number, once your decimals appear. So if all those zeros appeared at the end of your number, then your calculator has recognized this number. So to check, press second function, so shift, and press clear all. Okay, down here at the bottom, below C, it says clear all. And if you hold the button down, it will say 1 PYR on your screen, which means that you have correctly changed your primary setting to 1 compounding period per year. Okay, so from now on, your calculator should work fine. The other thing that we would prefer you to do is we would prefer that you use 4 decimal places, okay, because 2 is just not accurate enough. So we need to change the display setting of your calculator, which is down at the bottom here, below your equal sign. So we want to make that 4, shift, and display. And sorry, my mistake. I always do this the wrong way around. So we want to do shift display first and then press 4. Okay? Sorry. I don't use this calculator very often, so I generally stuff that up. So we want 4 decimal places. The other one, this is just, occasionally people accidentally stuff it up and then they have a heart attack, is the Anglo-Saxon convention for calculator usage is that we use a decimal place as the decimal, and we use commas to separate our thousands. Okay? The European convention is the other way around. You use a comma as your decimal, and you use your dots to separate your thousands. Sometimes people accidentally change it, and you do that by that little bottom just below your decimal. You can see that it's dot and a slash and a comma. So that's how you change that. So just have a look if I change it, shift and my decimal, and you can see that my decimal place has turned into a comma. So if you accidentally change that, that's what you did. You pressed the decimal button with the shift. Okay? So these are your primary settings of your calculator. You need to make sure that shift clear all, so your PY is set to 1. Okay, that's the biggest thing, and that's why when you bought your calculator, you took it out of its wrapping that you probably needed a cleaver to open. You know, that's why you didn't get it right. So primarily, we're going to use the top 5 buttons of our calculator. N obviously represents time, IYR represents the interest rate, PV represents present value, payment represents payment, and FV represents future value. So pretty logical there. On the bottom part of that key, so we're going to look at some other things. The bottom part of the interest rate button, it says nominal percentage, NOM%. That is when we're going to do interest rate calculations, when we're going to calculate effective rates and things, you can use your calculator to do that. So this is where you put your nominal interest rate in. And the bottom of present value says effective. And what do you think that's going to do? It's going to calculate your effective rate. So the bottom part of payment is your compounding periods per year. So we're also going to use that. The last one, the bottom of FV, it says amort, which is your amortization. That is, we're going to introduce you to, remember if you've got a loan, then when you repay that loan, the payment can be divided into interest component and principal component. And how to distribute, how to divide how much of your payment is interest and how much of your payment is principal is what we're going to look at. And we also look at the balance, so the amount you owe at a specific point in time. Right? If you've got a 10-year loan and you want to know how much you owe after 5 years, then you don't want to, go through the steps and do it for 5 years. You can use your calculator to calculate it. Another thing we're going to look at the bottom of the MAR, so it says begin/end. That is to change your calculator from an ordinary annuity, which is its default setting, to an annuity due, which is the beginning setting. We're going to look at net present value. We're going to look at the internal rate of return. We're going to use that. To calculate cash flows, we're going to use the cash flow button CFJ. And again, at the bottom of the cash flow button, you have, in yellow, it says NJ. Now, NJ tells you how many times a specific cash flow occurs. So if you get the same cash flow more than once, then you use the NJ button to tell your calculator that this particular cash flow is repeated. The reason that you need to know how to do this is that in your programming of your calculator, for your cash flows, there is maximum 16 slots that you've got. You can only put in 16 years worth of cash flows. And what happens if you've got a 20-year project? Then you just ignore the last 4? You can't do that. So you have to, multiple cash flows have to be put into one memory slot. And we're going to do some statistics at the end of everything. So we're also going to use our sum sigma plus, which is basically our statistical functions. Okay, so you've got a piece of paper. If you don't, there's some at the front of the class. And these are some of the exercises we're going to go through. So pretty much I tried to come up with one of everything. So the first one is, to what will $5,000 invested for 10 years at 10% compounded annually accumulate? So in this case, the first thing you need to figure out is what information you are given and what information it represents. So I recommend that in the beginning, when you're still learning how your calculator works, you start with N and you go across in order. Okay? It means that you're not going to forget something. So we've got 10 years, so we've got 10N is our investment. We've got a 10% interest rate, so my interest rate is 10%. So again, you can see that every time I actually press the interest rate button, my decimals appear, which means that this is now in the program of the calculator. I've invested $5,000, so 5,000, and present value. My payment is 0. Now I can either enter it as 0, so I can go 0 payment, or if I am sure that my memory is empty, I can leave it blank. Okay? If this is the first question that you're doing, you've never used your calculator before, it's empty, so you can leave it blank. So to find our future value, simply press future value, and you get minus $12,968. And if you didn't get minus $968, that's because your calculator, you've used it before and you didn't clear the memory. And it tells you that the payment was not 0. So to check, what was in that particular memory slot, press the recall button, RCL, down here is the recall button, press recall and payment. And if you have anything other than 0, it means that you left something in there from your previous calculation. It's a computer, but it's not like a PC, okay? One of the important things, and everybody's going to laugh at this, but you have no idea how many times I've seen it, okay? If you turn the calculator off and on, it's not like rebooting the computer, okay? It doesn't forget things. It's still there. So until you actually overwrite the program or clear it, it will always remember this number. Okay, so in our case, we're back to my future value of $12,968. And you can see that this is negative $12,000. Why is it negative? It's because my present value that I put in was positive. So if you input a positive number, you will get a negative number. If you input a negative number, you will get a positive number. It doesn't matter which one. Okay? The general convention is that present value is usually a negative number. Okay? By default, that's what we do. So now we want to make sure that we don't let any of these numbers interfere with our next calculation. So to clear the memory, we press Shift and clear all. So if you see one PYR appear on your screen, you have cleared the memory of your calculator. So go on to the next one, question number 2. How many years will it take for $500 to grow to $1,039.50 if invested at 5% compounded annually? So now I'm looking for time. So I've got 5% is my interest rate. I've got $500 is my present value. I don't have any payment, so I can ignore that. And $1,039.50 is my future value. And if I press N now, what do you think is going to happen? I'm going to get a nice no solution. And I did that deliberately. I really did. Why did I do that deliberately? Because I wanted to show you what happens if you don't pay attention and you make both present value and future value positive. You can't receive $500 today, get 5% interest, and receive $1,039 in the future. No bank's going to do that, right? So you need to deposit $500, so your present value has to be negative. So 500 minus, okay, the plus minus button, and press present value, and then press N. So it's going to take you 15 years. Now, one more important thing. When you're turning a number negative, you need to use the plus minus button. You cannot use the subtraction key, because negative 500 is not the same as subtracting $500. Okay? So when you're turning numbers negative, you have to use the plus minus sign. So again, remember to clear the memory of your calculator, so Shift clear all. And we're down to question 3. What rate would you require to grow $500 to $1,948 in 12 years? So you now have a 12-year time horizon, so N equals to 12. You're looking for the interest rate, so you've got $500, $500 negative is your present value. Remember, it's negative. You're depositing $500 to get back 1948. So 1948 is your future value. You've got 0 payments. So we're looking for, what was it that we're looking for? We're looking for the interest rate. So press I, and you need a 12% rate to quadruple your money in 12 years. Okay? Any questions? Everybody good? So again, remember, clear your calculator between each question. Okay? Question number 4. What is the present value of $800 to be received 10 years from now, discounted back to the present at 10%? So we've got a 10-year investment, so N equals to 10. We've got a 10% interest rate. We have $800 that we are going to receive in the future, so that's our future value. And we want to find our present value. So we need to set aside $308 to be able to have $800 in 10 years' time. Okay? So really, I mean, as you can see, the calculator itself is not terribly complicated. Where it becomes complicated is you interpreting the question, is to figure out what the question is giving you and what the question is asking from you. So clear it again. Question number 5. What is the accumulated sum of $500 a year for 10 years compounded annually at 5%? So here I'm saying $500 a year, which is essentially $500 per year or every year. So this is now an annuity. So I've got how many payments? I've got 10 payments. I'm getting a 5% interest on my account. I'm going to get $500 every year. So that's my $500 is the payment, right? $500 was my payment. And I want to find my future value. So I'm going to have $6,288.94 after 10 years of $500 in my account. Yes? No problem. So do that one again. So what is my time? I've got 10 years. Okay. I've got 5%. So 5 is my percentage, my interest rate. I'm getting 5. My present value is 0, right? I'm not putting any money in today, but my payment of $500, and find the future value. It helps if I press the button. 6,288. Okay? Now, number 6 is we're going to introduce something new, and first of all, clear the calculator memory. Okay? So we've borrowed $1,500 from the bank, and you have to repay it in 5 annual payments at an interest rate of 10%. First thing is, how much is your annual repayments going to be? So what is n? N equals to 5. So we've got 5 years. We've got an interest rate of 10%. So we've got 10% as our interest rate. We've borrowed $1,500. So that's the present value of $1,500. Okay, is my present value. And what I want to find is the annual payment. So I press payment. So I'm going to have to repay $395.69 every year for 5 years. And the next part of the question is, what is the interest principal component of the first payment? So we're going to do an amortization table, essentially. Okay? So we're going to use the amort button. So press second. Okay, let me just double check. Yes, okay. So the first one, if you press second function shift amort, then it tells you that you are now, at top it says amort, so you're in your amortization table function. And the first thing it tells you is PER, so it's looking at the number, which period you are looking at the information. And it tells you the beginning of the period and the end of the period. So you are looking from the beginning of year 1 to the end of year 1. Okay? So that's our period. Press the equal sign, and you move on. Okay? Now, same program, it's still amort, but now it says principal. So the principal that you have paid, so out of the total 300 and whatever the number was, I can't remember, you have 385, you are paying $245 in principal, and press the equal sign again, you're paying $150 in interest. And press the equal sign again, and you have a balance, so you still owe the bank at the end of the first year $125, $1,254.30. So that breaks it down, breaks your total payment into interest and principal. So we want to find the second payment, okay? So we press 2, okay? So we want to find the interest principal of the second year. So 2, shift, amort. And now you can see that we're looking from period 2 to 2. So the beginning of the second year to the end of the second year. And again, simply press the equal sign to scroll through the program. In the second year, your principal repayment was $270.26. Press the equal sign again. Your interest repayment was $125 and change. And press the equal sign again. Your remaining balance, what you owe the bank at the end of the second year, $984.03. Okay? And if you want to find the third payment, you press 3, shift amort, and then you'll see that it's going to display period 3 to 3. And you can scroll down until you get to the end of the period. The last part that I want to find in this particular question is, what is the total interest and principal of the first 2 payments? So I want to look from period 1 to the beginning of the first year to the end of the second year. Okay? So now we're going to use another button. We're going to use the input button. The input button is kind of like a pending. Okay? When you want to enter two variables, how do you separate those two? So you separate them by the input button. So what is the beginning of our period? We start with period 1, so we go 1, input, okay? And you can see that the input appeared at the bottom, okay? So now it's waiting for the end of the period, which is going to be 2, because we want from the beginning of the first to the end of the second. So 2, and shift amort. Okay? So now you're looking at what is the periods under consideration. You're looking from the beginning of period 1 to the end of period 2. So press the equal sign again. So your principal, now if you remember back your first numbers that we looked at, is the principal of year 1 plus the principal of year 2 added together. The equal sign again. The interest is the interest in year 1, $150, and the interest in year 2, $125, added together for $275. And press equals again, and the remaining balance after the second year, $984. Okay? And you can do this for whatever period that you want to look at. Okay? Any questions? Everybody good? Everybody starting to like their calculators? It's not sent by the devil anymore? Okay, so now clear the screen, but remember pressing C simply clears the screen, doesn't clear the programming. So we want to clear the programming, so press Shift, clear all. Okay? So question number 7, what is the present value of $2,500 a year for 10 years compounded annually at 7%? So again, this is an annuity of $2,500 per year. So we've got a 10-year investment, so n equals to 10. We get 7% per year. And we've got $2,500 is the payment, right, that I'm receiving every year. And what is my present value? Well, 17,555.8. I said one too many fives. $17,558.95. Okay? Now, do an annuity due. Remember, an annuity due is when your payment is made at the beginning of the period. And in terms of an equation, we make changes to the equation that we do. Now, to make the same changes to the equation, first of all, clear your memory. Okay? To make the same changes to the equation, we need to set our calculator to begin. So remember, the begin is up here. It's in orange. So press Shift and begin. And now what you'll see is at the bottom of your screen, it actually says begin. So if you see that at the bottom of your screen, you know that your calculator has changed all its calculations to make sure that you have an annuity due. So for question number 8, you take out a loan with 6 equal repayments of $500 at the beginning of each year. How much was borrowed if an interest rate of 8% was paid? So we've already set it to begin, so we don't need to change anything. How many payments are we making? We are making 6 payments, n equals to 6. We're going to pay 8% interest, and we're going to make a $500 repayment. So find the present value, which means we have borrowed $2,496.35. Okay? Yes? Do that one again? No problem. Okay. So first thing is, set your calculator to begin. So remember, now there's nothing on my screen, so it's set to end. It's an ordinary annuity. So press Shift, begin, begin. And now you can see that begin appeared on your screen. So now it's an annuity due. And how many payments am I making? I'm making 6 payments, so n equals to 6. I've got 8% as my interest rate, so 8 is my interest rate. And I'm paying $500 every year, so $500 payment. And press present value, and we've borrowed $2,496. Okay? Now, I forgot to add a bond question, so I'm going to, there's one on the board. So essentially imagine, okay, clear the memory first. Now, bonds are ordinary annuities, which means just like when your interest rate in the beginning that we have to change, we've changed, by setting this to begin, we've changed the primary setting of the calculator. And we want to get away from this, otherwise everything we do from now on is going to be wrong. So remember that we always want a nice clear screen, so shift, begin again, and now no begin, which means we're back to an ordinary annuity. So I have a bond example for you. First one is we're going to calculate the price of the bond, and the second one is we're going to calculate the yield to maturity. So my first example is we have a bond with a face value of $1,000 and a coupon rate of 9%, maturing in 10 years. If my required rate of return is 10%, how much am I willing to pay for this bond? So I'll say that again. I have a $1,000 bond with a coupon rate of 9%, maturing in 10 years. If my required rate of return is 10%, how much am I willing to pay for the bond? So what is the face value of my bond? The face value is the future or the maturity value of $1,000. Okay, so at the end of the life, I'm going to get back my $1,000. I have a coupon rate of 9%, which calculates my payment. I'm going to get 9% of $1,000. So I'm going to get $90 every year. So I have a $90 payment. Okay? I have a 10 years to maturity. So n equals to 10. And I have a 10% required rate of return, which means I have a 10% interest rate. So calculate the price of the bond, and the price is you are willing to pay a maximum of $938.55 for this bond. Okay? So that's the most you're willing to pay. Now, what is a more common question is, because in real life, you're actually given the price of the bond. You know how much it's going to cost. So what you would rather calculate is what is going to be your percentage return on your investment. So let's clear the memory of our calculator again. So same bond, still got a $1,000 9% 10-year bond. But now I know that the price of this bond, the market price, is $950.28. What I want to know is what is my percentage return. So now I've got 10 years is the life of my bond. I've got a price of $950.28, and I have to pay $950.28. So make sure that is negative. Okay, I'm paying this money to buy the bond, is my present value. I'm going to get $90 every year is my payment, right? 9% coupon. Oops, sorry. And I've got a $1,000 future value. So what do I want to know? I want the yield to maturity, or the rate, which is the interest rate. So it's working, and I have a 9.8% return on my money. Okay? So obviously logical, if you're willing to pay $938 and it costs you $950, you're not going to make your 10% that you want. You're only going to make 9.8%. Now, if you haven't cleared your calculator, like I said in the beginning, it's usually very good if you get the answer wrong and you know that the answer is wrong, you can go back and check your inputs to see why it was wrong. Okay? Because the calculator calculates it correctly based on the numbers that you have put in. So if it's wrong, it's because you've put something in there that is incorrect. So you check that using the recall function. So press recall and press n. And in our case, n was 10, right? We've got a 10 years to maturity. Plus recall and present value. My price was $950.28. Recall payment, got a $90 coupon. And recall future value was $1,000. So that's just a way to double check that did you put the right numbers in there. Okay? And now, clear. So the next one, we're going to move to effective annual rate. So I have an what is the effective annual rate of 8% compounded monthly? So now we're going to just use the orange part of our keys over here. Remember, this says nominal, effective, and periods per year. So the first thing we need to say is, what is our nominal rate? Our nominal rate is 8%, so we've got 8. Shift, remember it's orange, nominal is an orange, so we need to use our shift key, and press nominal. Okay? Next we want to put in how many compounding periods do we have? Well, it's monthly, so we've got 12, shift, and PYR tells us how many compounding periods that we have. So press PYR, the bottom of your payment button. And next press shift and effective to find the actual number. So 8% compounded monthly is an effective rate of 8.3%. Do it again. Okay, so you've got a nominal rate, so 8, shift, nominal. All right? We've got our compounding periods of 12, so 12, shift, periods per year. And shift effective to get your answer. Okay? Now, this is where you have to be very, very careful. Is we've changed our periods per year. Just like when you originally bought your calculator, it's set to monthly. So if you press shift clear all, you can see that it says 12, which means that unless, again, you want everything you do from now on to be wrong, you need to make sure you set that back to 1. So 1, shift, PYR, and to double check, shift clear all, and it says 1, you're good. Okay? Now I want to do one more. What happens if I give you the effective rate and ask you to solve for the nominal? So example, 12% is my effective annual rate, compounded quarterly. What is my nominal rate? So now I input my effective rate. So 12, shift, effective. Right? That's what I want. I've put in my effective rate. The compounding frequency of quarterly, which is 4, right? 4 quarters in 1 year. So 4, shift, PYR. And shift nominal gives me 11.49. So you can enter your nominal, your compounding, and get your effective. Or you can enter your effective compounding and get your nominal. Either one works. Remember now, with O, back to 4 periods per year, so we want to set that to 1. So 1, shift, PYR, and check, shift, clear all. We're back to 1, so all my calculations are fine. Okay? So moving on to net present value. Now on your sheet, because I did this for more than one calculator, because net future value, payback period, discounted payback period, and the modified internal rate of return are not available on this calculator. Okay? So with this calculator, you can only do net present value and internal rate of return. So those are the only two things we're going to do. We've got the following cash flows. We're going to spend $10,000 today. We're going to get $5,000 in year 1, $8,000 in years 2 and 3, $6,000 in year 4, and $2,000 in year 5. If I have a cost of capital of 12%, what is my net present value? So we use the cash flow, CFRJ, to put in our cash flows. So we always start with the initial outlay. So we've got $10,000, and that's negative, right? Again, use the negative button. Don't press not the subtraction, negative button, and press CFJ. And if you hold the key down, you see 0, CF, which means cash flow 0. And as you let it go, it says $10,000. So that tells you that cash flow 0 equals to $10,000. Next one, we were getting $5,000 in year one, so $5,000 CFJ. So again, as you hold it down, it says 1 CF, cash flow number 1, and you let it go, it says $5,000. So cash flow number 1 equals to $5,000. Cash flow number 2 is $8,000, so 8,000 and CFJ. So cash flow number 2 equals to $8,000. And this cash flow happens twice. So we need to tell the calculator that this happens twice. So we need to use the bottom part of the key, NJ. So how many times does the cash flow happen? It happens twice. So 2 shift NJ. And at the bottom it tells you 2N. So cash flow number 2. Okay. Let it go. It says 2 happens twice. Okay. So as you're holding the button down, it tells you which cash flow you are talking about. So number 2 is the one we were talking about, and let it go, it says 2, it happens twice. Cash flow number 4, so in the 4th year you get $6,000, so 6,000 CFJ. And now you can see that it says 3, okay? And that's fine, because it is the 3rd actual cash flow you are inputting in your calculator. But your calculator knows that cash flow number 2 happened twice, so it knows that this is, even though it's the 3rd, it occurs in year 4. So it does all the correct time value of money calculations, and you're going to get $6,000. And last but not least, you're going to get $2,000, and that's going to be the 4th input into your calculations. Okay? Everybody good? Everybody got up to 4, $2,000. So next we want our net present value. So we put in our discount rate. So we put 12 and we put I. So the interest rate is 12%. So you use your normal interest rate button. And we want net present value. Again, it's in orange. So shift net present value. And our net present value is $11,484.04. Okay. And the last thing you can calculate here is the internal rate of return. So press Shift internal rate of return. Takes a few seconds. And your internal rate of return is 54.76%. Okay. Everybody good? And the last thing, we're going to do some statistics. Everybody's favorite. Okay? So again, clear the memory. Just make sure everything is blanked. Now, remember we used the input button before. The input is like a pending button. So we're going to use it again because we have 2 groups of data. Okay? We've got X and Y. We want to calculate the average, the expected return, the standard deviation, and the correlation coefficient. Okay? So, first of all, what buttons are we going to use? We're going to use the input button because we have 2 sets of data. We're going to use the sigma plus button because that's our statistical input series. We're going to use the number 4 button. If you look on the orange part of, sorry, not number 4, first number 7 first. If you look on the bottom part of the 7, it says X bar and Y bar. So that's the average of X and the average of Y. The number 8 button on the bottom, it says SX and SY. That is the sample standard deviation of X and the sample standard deviation of Y. Number 9 says sigma X, sigma Y, which is the population standard deviation of X and Y. Now, depending on which class you are in, you need to check with your lecturer whether if you're doing statistics, do they want sample or do they want population standard deviation? There are differences. So check with your lecturer which one they want you to do. And bottom part, number 4, it says X with a little hat on top. Don't worry about what that means. And next to that, it says R. R is the correlation coefficient. And that we are going to use. So how are we going to use all this? We're first of all going to put our numbers in, and we put our numbers in pairs. We're going to put the first set of X and Y Then we put the second set of x and y, third set of numbers, fourth set of numbers. Okay? So we start off with 10, input. So we've put in the first number of the first pair, and we put in 20, sigma plus. So, and now you can see that after I pressed sigma plus, 1 appeared, which means I've put in one set of numbers. Okay, one group of numbers. Second set is 12 and 6, so 12 input and 6 sigma plus. And now it says 2 because I've put in the second set of numbers. I've got 5 and 10, so 5 input, 10 sigma plus, my third set of numbers, and 13 input, and 12 sigma plus, my fourth set of numbers. So you should end up with 4. If you didn't end up with 4, you either put in one few or one too many numbers. Okay? So now we want, first of all, the average. So we've got, it's yellow, so we've got shift and number 7. And the first number is, it tells us the average of x. Okay? Because that's what you see on your keyboard. It starts off x bar. So how do we move to the second number? How do we find the average of y? Well, we press swap. Okay? If you go up, you can see swap. Okay? Under the K. So press shift swap. And the average of y is 12. Okay? So to swap between the two numbers, you need to obviously use the swap function. So we want the sample standard deviation of x and y. So shift number 8. So the sample standard deviation of x, 3.55. Y, press swap. So shift swap, 5.88. Population standard deviations would be shift number 9 of x, 3.08. Swap. So shift swap, 5.09. So again, check with your lecturer whether they want sample or population. And the last one we're going to look at is the correlation coefficient. So that's going to be the second one. So shift 4. We can ignore the first one. Don't worry about it. All we want is the second. So shift swap. Oops, press the button. Is negative 0.0318 is the correlation of my two sets of data. Okay? So that's pretty much, I would say, 90% of what you are going to use it for. One more thing I want to show you. This is just simplicity's sake. If you are entering a very big number, okay, so this is $12,365,845, and you realized that you should have actually entered $12,365,854, because it happens, and you don't want to have to type in the whole number again. What you can use is the back arrow key. Okay? So the back arrow simply deletes the last numbers that you have entered. So it's a way of, if you just pressed one number wrong, to delete that number instead of having to write the whole thing all over again. Okay? So clear all, shift clear, and that's all I've got to show you. Anybody have any questions? Nope. In that case, please practice with your calculators. It's not terribly difficult, but you do need to get into the habit. So good luck, enjoy your classes, and see you later.